Hey y'all, it's been a little while since I've done a bit of a Jay-Z ranty, here's his 2 cents and opinion video. And I'm going to do this for two reasons. Number one, I kind of have writer's block and I'm having trouble starting to script some of the videos that will be upcoming soon. But I have topics, I'm just blah at the moment. But the other one is that I've noticed a couple specific things of contesting opinions and arguments going on throughout the Reptile social media verses and things like that. So I want to kind of throw in my 2 cents a little bit about that. Whether or not you should heed my opinion or think about it or use that to help form your own opinions about things, then hey, cool. But just kind of in general, I'm another guy on the internet talking to a camera. The only difference is a lot of times I will do a little bit more fact checking and research before I throw stuff out there. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So, first things first, what I've noticed is a lot of people are freaking out about the market right now. So, we all know here, and really worldwide, the reptile industry and exotic pet industry as a whole is technically an industry. It is, in fact, a market. Yes, majority of people out there who actually have these animals as pets do use them as a hobby. But it is realistically an actual market and industry, which a lot of the times, and myself included, ends up happening where there's a lot of conflicting feelings and decisions based about economic income and sustainability, as well as, hey, these are live animals that theoretically we genuinely care about. And so I just kind of want to talk a little bit about that right now. So everyone right now is talking about how, the market is oversaturated and it's booming with ball pythons and everyone is complaining about not just ball pythons, but retics as well. To a lesser extent, crested geckos, but crested geckos. And how everything is changing and there's so many just sitting and it's not worth it to get into it and yada, 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 yada. I've done my best to kind of stay out of the new dubia ownership change and why all of the old school people are really upset about the changes being done, although as a regular person who doesn't have an active account selling on a morph market and just uses it to kind of check prices and see what's available, I haven't noticed a whole lot of difference, but I'm sure someone will enlighten me in the comments of this video. And then as far as the retic conversation goes, I've also kind of done my best to avoid that because, to be completely honest with you, I don't really like, and this is one of the ones where I probably should have done a little bit more research for, admittedly, but I don't really want to listen to 2-hour-long podcasts with the dude bros of the reptile industry with the retics. And yes, I know, I'm sure I just upset a few people just now, but historically, and specifically with the mainland retics, let's be honest, the retic portion of our hobby has always been kind of like the Gold's Gym section of our hobby, and I think you kind of know what I'm getting at. And not to say that I don't like retics. There's one behind me right now, and I would actually really love to get into a couple locale-specific super dwarfs. But I'm guessing right now why all the huge discourse going on with retics is because, number one, a lot of them don't really understand the whole mixing island subspecies and locales that are naturally dwarfed and then putting in mainland animals to get the morphs. And why they don't understand why if you take an animal that theoretically will get 10 feet and an animal that will get 20 feet, why every single baby won't be a perfect in-between of those lengths, and so on and so forth as you breed down. And so people are either mislabeling them or just being upset about how you have a super dwarf that's 15 and a half feet long. The other reason I'm going to probably guess is that just how bloody how many there are right now, because instead of a ball python who lays 9 to 10 eggs, average, retics will lay over 30. So, but the other one obviously being ball pythons. You look on Morph Market right now, you're seeing tens of thousands of ball pythons, some of which have been sitting there for more than a year. And there's a whole thing about this reptile hobby that at this point probably a lot of you are aware of, which is it's kind of in this 2 to 3 year cycle, where especially since the rise of social media, where people like Brian Barczyk and Brian Cusco and people like them made it look really cool to be ball python breeders. And this is not a dig at either of those two or anyone else in those early YouTube days doing that. Not at all. They're part of the reason why a lot of us are in this hobby, myself included, at least as far as the breeding aspect goes. But they made it look like that you could become a millionaire just by breeding ball pythons overnight, which we all know as well, that's not accurate at all. And so because of that, what happens is about every 2 to 3 years, a whole bunch of people get into the hobby. They buy a couple racks, they'll buy 8 to 10 ball pythons, and then after a couple years of feeding them, still growing them, some of them go off food because sometimes they do that, probably because their husbandry isn't accurate, because they're not making any money, it's just a money pit, it's not worth it. We've all heard the lines. Then they get out and sell their whole collections. Well, 2020, in addition to being to the year where it changed the world forever, it also was one of the highest peaks of the reptile market to begin with. There's a lot of numbers being thrown around about how big the reptile industry is, how much money it makes, how much money it's worth, how many animals there are, but it does estimate that 1 in 5 to 6 households does have a reptile pet, most of which are either a bearded dragon or a ball python. And that happened, that study or survey took place at the end of 2020 to the beginning of 2021. So right during the peak of this. Also, when everyone and their mothers got dogs and cats, but when a lot of people made them go back to work, they had to give up their dogs and cats, but they didn't give up their ball pythons, crested geckos, and bearded dragons. So there's still a lot of people that have these animals. And to be completely honest with you, they are still importing in tons and tons and tons of wild-caught animals from Africa right now because people are still buying them. Just not as many people are cracking down on the high dollar volume animals. I myself took back a whole lot of the breeders that I was going to be producing. I was going to have over 20 pairs this summer, but I brought it back to about 11 or 12, and obviously not all of those go either. And I only have a handful left from my last season, and I had over 80 babies. So I'm still moving animals, and I don't even do shipping. So clearly there is still a market there. People are still demanding ball python, cresties, and bearded dragons. And I've made this statement before too. I've gone to some of the larger reptile shows, bringing multiple species, sometimes more than 15 species on a table. And the only thing that sells is another wholesaler buying all of one species of animal, like a sand boa, and then ball pythons. That's what people are still asking for. People have been saying that the market has been saturated for years, probably over 10 or 12 years at this point. A lot of people don't really remember this, but back in 2015, 2016 was the other kind of just beginning to ramp up again before another lull, and people were just giving animals away. I was picking up highways and gravels, now this is 7 years ago, so you'd think they were still incredibly valuable. They'd only been on the scene for a couple years, really. I was still getting them for like $150 for a Mojave highway I picked up from a DFW Arlington show. So there's highs and lows all the time, and people always complain about ball pythons. Ball pythons are the best and the worst thing that happened in the hobby. It removed a whole lot of the more passion, a lot of the trading, a lot of the more kind of oddball and intricate species because people were chasing that dollar, but it's also been the thing to get so many people interested in this hobby. And now we have unfortunately lost some of those projects and animals to just kind of history, but there is starting to be an upkeep in more interest in some of those more oddball species where people are getting into diversity collections, which is really, really cool. So basically what I'm kind of getting at to all of this is that is an argument, a little bit opinionative, that the market is saturated or there's too many ball pythons. There is still a demand for them. They are still selling. Maybe not quite as many as the Canova 80 grand ball pythons. And yes, I'm aware I'm exaggerating that price. It's to make a point. Those incredibly high dollar investment animals right now, with the kind of lowball part of the roller coaster of the industry, and what everyone sees is the economy is bad and the world is ending, and arguably it is. It's getting hotter and hotter every single day. But whether or not that's truly affecting us on an individual basis right now every single day is definitely debatable, because it's still on the rise, and people are still interested in it. And the biggest thing that I think a lot of people forget is that a lot of this does have to do with social media. It's also a really good and a really bad thing for not only this industry, but in general. It makes it to where a lot of people can connect all over the world that have similar interests. It's a really good way of spreading information, getting news, learning about new things, but it's also a way to kind of distort reality a little bit. So similar to where like the Brian Barcheks, Brian Cuscos, those people that made it look like you become millionaires overnight with ball pythons, all we see right now is just a couple of the breeders, I say a couple, it's probably a few dozen at this point, that are always complaining, and then it just spreads out through the snowball effect, the real trickle down, to I'm not moving my investment animals, the market's destroyed, blah, 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 blah. And that's what we always see. And because it's in truth, our attention spans are pretty short these days. We still do remember things, but because we get it over and over so quickly and the access is so readily available, we just forget about that. And so all we see is just too many ball pythons, markets are saturated, no one's moving animals, and that's all we see. So that's all we can think about is economy bad, no one's moving animals, too many ball pythons. And so that's kind of the opinion that's been formed a little bit. I know I'm harping on ball pythons right now, but there are it's the same 5 species that everybody has always complained about. But in truth, there is still a need and a want for them. Arguably, we should probably pull back on the whole retic thing just because of how big they get. And like I said, there's the whole, I know that there is going on the whole dwarf and super dwarf thing. This isn't here to talk about that. It's just kind of the industry as a whole. So that's kind of my opinion, which is, every made up market or industry, it doesn't matter what it is, goes through cycles, ups and downs. Whether it's the stock market or this or any other industry, there's ups and downs. And the reptile industry is definitely one that is on the down, but it is still growing every single year, just not as rapidly as it does as other times. If we look at a graph, it does this, but it's still always moving in that direction, just not as high, spiky, or as rapidly. Sorry, I don't actually have one to show you. I'm not very good at making graphs, so I do apologize, but I will put in some links to articles that I did look into that I'm going to be throwing a little bit of rough numbers out at you that you can go and check out as well. The other one that I have been seeing a lot lately is that this is a very high dollar value industry, and people should invest in it or get involved with this industry. And the thing about that is while that is technically a very true statement, it's a little bit disingenuous. So this is the part where I say I'm going to put those articles down there, but this is information that doesn't have like a Forbes really, that's a lot easier to fact check. And so if you ever decide to do research into this, you will start to notice that there is a lot of the exact same wording, sentences, paragraphs, exactly the same thing. And typically those are usually Wikipedia articles that are just copied and pasted and then added into graphics under a different article, website, URL. And you'll notice that very quickly. So as best as I can, these were the ones that seemed the least a little bit fishy, a little bit sketchy websites that seemed to have a little bit more validity to them, and those numbers were consistent in different ones. So this is that grain of salt part while I say that I do typically do a little bit more research into these things other than just taking the word for people who theoretically have a bigger stake in it, who also theoretically have been doing it longer than me, but are just as likely as any other person, including myself, to just throw stuff out there because they think it affects them or they just heard it also through the grapevine. But the reptile hobby and the exotic market in general, the exotic pet trade hobby industry, whatever we want to call it, is huge. Not only in America, but in China, in Japan, in the UK, all across Europe, in Canada, and it is growing every single year. There's something like, I don't even know how many there are. It's like 15 billion is what the estimated value. So what everything, the whole market, people who breed, people who keep, people who like ZoomMed and Exoterra, like those type of big companies, more than just the actual animal part involved, all of that they estimate as of 2023, the beginning of 2023, is something over $15 billion. And they estimate that it's like $5-something billion in revenue that it generates every single year, which sounds super scary. You know, that's just the reptile part. The exotic part is something like 78 billion. There were numbers again being thrown around out here. Something like 51% of animals as pets kept in the U.S. are exotic, which essentially could be a hedgehog, a sugar glider, birds, reptiles, amphibians, axolotls, all those things. And a little more than half of those are reptiles and amphibians. So they do make up a huge amount. Like I said earlier, 1 in 5 to 6 households has an exotic pet, typically a reptile, in every household in America. So it is a really big industry. But going back to that social media thing, like I said before, all anyone ever sees are the influencers. Those chasing that dollar, chasing that fame. And it's argued that I'm technically doing that as well. Mine is definitely more avenue towards learning and education and growing versus, hey, check out these really cool baby ball pythons that I just cut a huge window into. I do still do egg cutting video, well, baby reveal videos and little fun things like that, but that's not really my avenue per se, but that's what we see most often. The biggest people in the reptile hobby and industry that we see are the people who do the dynamic stuff, who do the here my cute little baby things. And yeah, sure, there's people out there like Snake Discovery that does also push more education and things like that, and Brian Barczyk definitely is doing more of those things than he was certainly before, and there's other people doing that as well. But there's still a lot of clickbait, there's still a lot of catchy stuff, there's still a lot of the morph market's crashing, they're booting me off, and you know, my ball pythons have sat for a year. That's the stuff that we see every single day, and that's what everyone assumes the reptile industry is that you have to be a breeder. But there is so much more to this industry than just breeding animals. There's glass manufacturers, not even talking about the Zoo Meds and Acadias, the people who just make plastic and glass panels and pieces that get sold to those companies are part of that. The coconut industry for the cocoa husk and the chipper and the Reptichip, that is part of that. The lumber mills that make the aspen bedding, that is part of that. The lighting companies, the individual small business owners that are making the cages and racks are part of that. And then other people that are also technically involved in that are like the little niche small businesses that make kind of accoutrements or accents to that. So the people who do the stickers, who do the jewelry, who do the Etsy stuff, who do all those other different things, all of that makes up the reptile industry. It's a whole lot more than just you have to breed snakes. And for the longest time was you have to breed ball pythons, but now it's there's too many ball pythons, you have to go breed boas, or you have to go breed this type of king snake, or you have to go get into this type of super specific lizard that there's only 3 of in the whole world, and so it probably came here. No, none of that nonsense. There's a whole lot more that you can do to be involved in this industry or hobby, and that's what it is for most people. Well over half, most people who have an exotic pet have it as a pet. It's a hobby. Most people don't have more than 1 or 2 animals. It's a very, very small section that actually breeds in anything like mass. And even technically, the large amount that I have is small potatoes compared to a lot of people. But the big problem that we have is that all of the hobbyist keepers, and even people who have, even up to 20 or 30 animals, which is still a decent sized collection, all model themselves after those big boys. Everyone who has a couple ball pythons, that's why they sell the 2-stack, like 470 racks, or like the 1 stack that I've seen. People who have 1 animal don't need to keep in a rack system. And no, this is not me ragging on racks. I'm just letting you know the racks are there for us, but that's how the breeders model their stuff, and that's because that's what we all see because of social media, right? As I'm doing the Pokemon Go flip. That's what's all modeled after, and that's what we see, so that's where all of these opinions and assumptions are made. So the biggest thing about this that I kind of want to take away to kind of sum all this up is that, do I think the market is oversaturated with ball python retics? No asterisk. Those are still the most sought after animals. Do I personally think that we need to dial back on the amount of retics being bred? Do we need to stop doing it? No. but do I think we need to dial it back on how many they lay just because based on how many are laid in a single clutch and how big they get? Yeah, probably. Do I think that we should probably reevaluate how we start to label and advertise all the super dwarf and dwarf retics? I don't know enough about it, but I know enough about this because we are line breeding livestock guarding dogs. When you take two purebred dogs, you don't get a straight split of physical features, personality, or even size of those two purebreds, or even two different purebreds is what I'm referring to, or even two purebreds. If one just happens to be quite a bit bigger, one quite a bit smaller, you're not going to get every single puppy exactly the same. They're going to be mixed, and every single puppy, that's not how genetics works. And I think that's kind of the idea that a lot of these people get into. And yeah, I'm aware I'm going off an opinion. 100% I'm talking out of my butt just a little bit about this, but I'm pretty sure that's what the whole discourse is about the retics thing. So we should probably really start to readdress what exactly all that is, or the assigned value to those things, or everything like that. I've always been kind of a person who loves retics, but too many people haven't. And then the other thing is this a hobby that is blown out of proportion, isn't as big as it is, it's a sinking ship? Also, no, it is not. This is a low point. There is a whole lot of other stuff that is going to affect not this industry, just the world in general, that might make people kind of reevaluate where their stuff is put, and we're not there. Do I think it's a possibility down the road? Sure, but we're not there yet. So if anybody is interested in breeding, even if they're interested in breeding ball pythons, that's fine. That's cool. Oh, you want to have just one or two? Also cool. Super awesome. Great. Don't expect to get rich overnight. Don't expect to get rich at all. This is what should theoretically be, even people who do this as a career like I'm attempting to do. It's supposed to be something you love. And again, they're living, breathing animals. We can't think of them as, it's a messed up thing, but you have to think of them as a commodity, but not. Where if someone is chasing after me for like a $500-$600 animal, but I know that they aren't prepared for that animal, but I'm really hurting for that money, I'm probably going to make the decision to keep that animal and wait for them to either get their stuff straight. And yes, I am speaking from experience. This has happened a couple times over this last year where multiple people have approached me for an animal, even done like the payment plan, all that jazz and setup, but they just weren't really quite ready for it, or had a whole lot of ifs, ands, or buts. And so I said, no, I'm just going to hold on to that animal. And I know I might be an outlier in that, but I think that's kind of the attitude and mentality that we are moving towards. And if you don't want to get into reptile, or if you want to be part of this industry, but you don't want to be part of what is the inflated ball python market or animal market, and maybe you're artistic or creative, maybe you can work on, doing something with manufacturing cages, like little niche items. Like, okay, a lot of people have screen tops, a lot of people have really bad ventilation or trouble with humidity for ball pythons and other tropical species. So I'm going to make lids that exactly fit all of the major brands for all the different sizes, and you can just order them from me and they will fit perfectly on there. So that way you'll have, still airflow to allow the animals to breathe and for the substrate to respirate and everything like that. But that way you won't have a huge loss of humidity. Or maybe you want to do 3D backgrounds, or maybe you're artistic and creative and you want to make cool different art pieces, either jewelry or cool little accessories, or you want to do stickers or t-shirts or cool merch, or hey, it's 2023, let's get out of the let's everyone be afraid of snakes. Let's stop using the snake metaphor is bad, like, oh, that politician, he's a snake in the grass. Let's get out of that, and you can be part of, making something cool, like a cool slogan against moving away from that or something like that. So really what it is, again, this is just a little rant video. This is just kind of my 2 cents in opinion. I know these videos don't usually do as well, but hey, I just want to throw it out there because I am someone that has been involved in this hobby for a little while, not nearly as long as others, not nearly as informed as others, not nearly as financially invested as others, although technically this is my livelihood as well, so I certainly personally have a whole lot staked in this, but this is just kind of my 2 cents about what's going on. You're seeing a whole lot of panic, a whole lot of discourse, a whole lot of doing this about everything. So just kind of someone who has a little bit more of a, usually I'd like to think of myself as more of a middle ground person for most things, or at the very least, if I'm definitely super hard one way, I can see points most of the time, at least where they're coming from, whether or not I agree with them or not, about other things over there. So people freaking out about, everything changing and how they used to do it. That's their livelihood. That's how they've been making money for a long time. I can see why people would be freaking out. But at the same time, I can also see why there could be a need for the different changes for that. So anyway, thank you so much for sticking with me on this video. Just want to throw something out there again. If you want to check out the links for a little bit more of the in-depth information that I was kind of alluding to with like how big it is and the different millions and billions of dollars and stuff, I will put a link to it, several of them down below in the description of this video. Stay tuned for more reptile content, as well as other fun little stuff that I will hopefully be getting to very soon. Just a little bit of behind, not only with writer's block, but dealing with the puppies for the livestock guarding dogs that are dual registered for different establishing breeds, and so it's just taking up a lot of my time. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, you can absolutely follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I post more about them because this is the Reptile channel, so I'm not really talking a whole lot about those. However, because I haven't brought it up for a little while, and hopefully y'all have stuck with me at this point, if we do get up to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube, which I know is still small potatoes for YouTube, but it's still a lot for me, we will do a full property tour of this whole building, of quarantine, of the animals outside, including the livestock and the puppies and the pond where our new rescue turtles are out. So we will do the full property tour at 5,000 subscribers. And at 10,000 subscribers, we will be doing an animal giveaway. And so if you can, please share it with all of your friends. Thank you again so much. Stay tuned for more reptile content. If you want to check out any of my other playlists or other cool stuff like that, please hit subscribe. Check out all those different really cool playlists. We're even now winding down on the United States of reptiles, so you'll be blowing through very close to soon 52 really cool little shorts of those reptile videos. If there's anything else you'd like to hear my opinion on or like to see as well, either a species spotlight, top 5 list, or really anything else, please let me know down in the description. You can email me as well. Hope everyone's having a great day, and we will check you next time.